Greetings, and welcome to A Year of Movies, a Planet Geek production. For this project, we are using the Ivan Walters reference book of 365 films to watch on the day they happened. Each day, we watch a movie associated with the date we are watching it on.
And as it is the 30th of July, we are going to be watching Cold Mountain from 2003, directed by Anthony Mignella and starring Jude Law. So this is one of those movies that did not see it in the theaters, but rentals when I used to work at Blockbuster, and always a great thing for someone who enjoys movies quite a bit. Now, I did see this movie on home. However, that probably would have been the only time that I'd seen this movie. So technically, this would be only my second 20 some odd years between views. Now, that being said, like I had already mentioned, not only does this movie star Jude Law, but it also stars Nicole Kidman, Renee Zellweger, Brendan Gleeson, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Natalie Portman, and Donald Sutherland. In this classic story of love and devotion set against the backdrop of the American Civil War, a wounded Confederate soldier named W.P. deserts his unit and travels across the South, aiming to return to his young wife, Ada, played by Nicole Kidman, who tend their farm. Makes his perilous journey home, Ada struggles with keeping her home intact, with the assistance of Ruby, played by Renee Zellweger, sent to help her by a kindly neighbor. Missed the fact that I did not see this on the big screen. This is kind of a really beautifully looking movie, the way it's shot and all that. So I think setting the movie in the Civil War era, scenery to be shot. And of course, when you're dealing with a cast like we have, a very amazing treat in the acting realm. And Nicole Kidman, just wonderful all around. But it's the other supporting cast members, like your Renee Zellweger and Philip Seymour Hoffman, too, in a period piece is always fun. Like a couple of days ago when I saw a Donald Sutherland movie, I had forgotten that Donald Sutherland was in this movie until his name popped up in the credits. I'm like, all right, another performance that I guess I probably would have seen. Natalie Portman as well is very fresh in everyone's mind as well, having just, the whole entire Star Wars thing at the time, too. Another interesting thing I find about this is that while it is the American Civil War, having both our lead actors American to begin with, I sort of twist to the situation, whereas almost practically everyone, I guess, except for like Brendan Gleeson, is also an American. Well, then again, except for Donald Sutherland, who's Canadian, but that's neither here nor there. Now, WP that Ada is trying to keep running a great storyline for the two separate lines to eventually, come together and whatnot. The movie does jump a little bit in the timeline, where detonate a bomb under the Confederate lines in Pittsburgh, and this happens like 1 hour into this 2 hour and 34-minute film. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular season, it ended up winning for Best Supporting Actress for Renee Zellweger, and got nominated for Best Actor for Jude Law, Best Cinematography, Best Editing, Best Original Score, and Best Original Song. And as it is the 31st of July, we are watching The Last Emperor from 1987, directed by Bernardo Bertolucci and starring John Lone. So to start off, it was kind of hard to ignore the actual existence of this movie, especially during the production, as it is the first outside of the country production being able to actually be shot in the actual Forbidden City itself, which was a huge monumental undertaking, just that alone. Also, the stacked cast of brilliant performances by all the Asian actors involved with this, also throwing in a Peter O'Toole, is definitely a reason to have seen this movie. Now, I have seen this movie before, but I vaguely remember it probably being back in the day on one of those first choice super channel equivalent to HBO at the time, and it more than likely was a pan and scan version of this movie, because from what I watched today, definitely is a much wider scope than what you would have been able to get in a square screen compared to a rectangular. And like I'd already mentioned, not only does this movie star John Lone, but it also stars Joan Chen, Peter O'Toole, Ying Raoxing, Victor Wong, Dennis Dunn, Ryoshi Sakamoto, and Maggie Han. In this account of the life of Pu Yi, played by John Lone, the last emperor of China, followed the leader's tumultuous reign after being captured by the Red Army as a war criminal in 1950. Pu Yi recalls his childhood from prison. He remembers his lavish youth in the Forbidden City, where he was afforded every luxury, but unfortunately sheltered from the outside world and complex political situations surrounding him. And as the revolution swept through China, the world of Pu Yi as revolution sweeps through China, the world Pu Yi knew is dramatically upended. Now, this is a hugely epic movie to be witnessing. The runtime is definitely a daunting one, but it is definitely worth the actual course of the entire movie. We have not only visually is this movie stunning to watch, not only are we seeing for the first time a lot of locations and buildings and interiors that were like unseen by anyone outside of China to begin with at the time. It's just a stunning movie to see. Costumes are immaculately gorgeous. All the opulence and riches being shown in the set decoration and the costume design. We have a fantastic cast of Asian actors that a lot of these faces are very familiar. And one of the interesting things about this movie is it is actually all done in English, which is kind of I guess at that length of a movie, a very thankful thing for an American audience to be witnessing at the time. But it's kind of interesting how all other languages are in the native and all that. There is a point almost like 2/3 into this movie when we hear someone speaking something other than English, and when they speak it, it's then translated, and through the translation we find out that they are speaking Japanese, which is kind of an interesting thing. So from that point of view, we are witnessing this movie in its Chinese language as it's been translated into English for our ears to hear, which is kind of interesting. A little later on, there are Russians that are speaking Russian, but yeah, it's kind of interesting to see. My question about this situation is when they bring Peter O'Toole in as a teacher of sorts when he's a young man, that he is there to teach him Western giving him maths and histories and English as well, so that he becomes fluent in it. So my question is, are the Peter O'Toole scenes actually in Chinese and we're hearing in the translated Chinese, or are they actually speaking English at the time when Peter O'Toole is speaking? But anyways, that being said, it is a spectacular movie. It's told, our main storyline is told from Pu Yi's imprisonment as he goes through his whole entire prison sentence. Throughout that timeline, we then jump back to periods in his life as a child, as an adolescent, a young man, and then like an older adult and all that sort of thing. Once we hit the adult section of this movie becomes very horny for a lot of sequences and all that sort of thing. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's just interesting to see how much of a sexual vibe the movie has at certain points. And again, it's just a fascinating thing to see. Again, a lot of faces are very familiar. I had made a comment that a good portion of the cast of Big Trouble in Little China are in this movie, which is kind of interesting to see them in a different setting, which is kind of cool how they're all together but playing completely different characters. But anyways, just a fantastic movie from start to finish. It kept me involved for the whole entire length of this movie. So it's on July 31st, 1950, when Pu Yi is turned over to the Chinese, where he gets put into their prison system. And that happens actually at not only 2 minutes, but at 20 minutes into this 2 hour and 43-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular season, it actually ended up winning for Best Picture, Best Art Direction, Best Cinematography, Best Costume Design, Best Director, Best Film Editing, Best Music/Original Score, Best Sound, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Sorry about this, but I just realized that was basically everything that it was nominated for it actually ended up winning, which is a very big rarity, especially with that long list. And as it is the 1st of August, we are going to be watching The Pianist from 2002, directed by Roman Polanski and starring Adrien Brody. So to begin with, a film in the early 2000s, it was also won critical acclaim and whatnot, so it was kind of hard to avoid that as well. But to be completely honest, I did not see this movie until probably my working at Blockbuster days, when it was one of those, hey, I can rent a bunch of movies in a week and all that sort of thing, and that's what I'll do. I'll make it one of these movies. But since then, I hadn't seen this movie, so it had been a while since I've watched this movie in its entirety. And like I had already mentioned, not only does this movie star Adrien Brody, but it also stars Thomas Kretschmann, Frank Finlay, Maureen Lipman, Ronan Vibert, Ruth Platt, and Amelia Fox. Wadel Shaw Splitzman, played by Adrien Brody, a Polish-Jewish radio station pianist, sees gradually as World War II begins. He is forced into the Warsaw Ghetto with his family, but is later separated from that family during the Operation Reinhard, from this time until the concentration camp prisoners are released. He hides in various locations among the ruins of Warsaw. Now, with this list of movies that I've been doing this project with, for every Young Frankenstein or Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, or even Independence Day 4, for every one of those, I get these types of movies, The Pianist. Now, they are usually very tough movies. They are very depressing. And this, I mean, I'm not going to say that this movie isn't, but it definitely is a very well done movie. I mean, the acting is superb, even though it is such a harrowing thing to witness. We're dealing with the World War II atrocities that happened in the 1940s. It's just... And again, they don't do happy stories from this era. Dark and depressing. Some underperform than others. This one, however, is definitely one of the informative and very entertaining way of witnessing the atrocities that happened at this time. And again, we're dealing with a fantastic cast. Adrien Brody as the lead does a great job. And it's a tough watch, but it is so well put together. Visually, it looks great. It feels of the era, which you feel like you're part of history instead of viewing history, if you understand what I'm trying to get at. But again, it's a tough movie to watch. 1st of August of 1944, when the Warsaw Uprising actually begins, and that is about an hour and 43 minutes into this 2 hour and 30-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular season, it won for Best Actor for Adrien Brody, Best Director, and Best Adapted Screenplay. It also ended up getting nominated for Best Picture, Best Film Editing, Best Cinematography, and Best Costume Design. And as it is the 2nd of August, we are going to watch Wild Bill from 1995, directed by Walter Hill and starring Jeff Bridges. So I am well aware of the story of Wild Bill Hickok. I am a fan of Jeff Bridges. However, until seeing this movie on this list, I did not know of the existence of this particular movie. So this would definitely be a first watching for me. And like I had already mentioned, not only does this movie star Jeff Bridges, but it also stars Ellen Barkin, John Hurt, Diane Lane, Keith Carradine, David Arquette, Christina Applegate, and Bruce Dern. Gunfighter Wild Bill Hickok, played by Jeff Bridges, travels the frontier, getting rough equal measure. He friends and occasional lover Calamity Jane, played by Ellen Barkin, for a while in a traveling circus. Susanna, played by Diane Lane, his one true love, but spurns her for the outlaw life. With his healthy, as his past catches up with him. So right out of the start, this movie, within the first 15 some odd minutes alone, has so many fights, so many shootouts and all that sort of thing. We have a really fun adventure ahead of us. The movie is shot in a sort of feeling as if it's like a TV movie sort of situation from, like I said, the mid 90s. Sex involved in this story that aired on regular television back in that time. But it also has an interesting look where it does some flashback sequences, whereas the look of black and white, yet it's not what it feels like. It looks like the black and white is a like digital representation of the day from like the middle 90s of how they would turn regular film footage into black and white. I mean, it doesn't look like film. It looks more like a video version of black and white and the rest of the movies in film and all that. So it has a weird sort of effect to it. It looks way too modernized looking for the rest of the film, which looks like it takes place in the Wild West sort of thing. But again, we're doing a fantastic character. It's kind of cool to see him not playing either Jeff Bridges or what he normally is doing nowadays, which is a version of the Dude, mustache and all that. Him playing this character is really fun to watch. Those around him are great. The movie is he also voiceovers the entire movie. Movie starts off at Wild Bill Hickok and then flashes back to storyline that runs forward, and then as we're running through the progression of that story, we then also have some flashbacks to previous moments, and those are the moments that become black and white, whereas the beginning of the movie, which is the present day at the end of the story, starts off in black and white as well. So it's a little bit confusing of how everything gets jumbled up in the storytelling, but it's still a really well done thing. We have a lot of great character actors portraying like these despots and outlaws and whatnots. It's it's not like a fun movie to watch, but it's entertaining enough that lined up with the enjoyment of the movie. So the character of puts together a posse to take out Wild Bill, kills all the gang members, and then returns to a saloon later on. And finally works up the nerve to shoot Hickok in the back of the head while Wild Bill is holding the quote-unquote dead man's hand, which is 2 black aces and 2 black eights. And that happens an hour and 21 minutes into this 1 hour and 38-minute movie. And as it is the 3rd of August, we are going to be watching The Last of the Mohicans from 1992, directed by Michael Mann and starring Daniel Day-Lewis. So to begin with, I did not see this movie in theaters. Totally aware of the making of and centered around such a fantastical story to begin with, but I didn't actually see this movie till much later, actually. I don't think I actually saw it until DVD rental many years after the movie had been released, although I had seen it on very many lists of best movies to watch for like the 90s and whatnot, but I didn't get around to seeing it till much, I'm pretty sure, late 90s is when I actually saw this movie. And since then I have seen it a couple of times, and but it has been a while since my last viewing. And like I had already mentioned, not only does this movie star Daniel Day-Lewis, but it also stars Madeline Stowe, Russell Means, Eric Schweig, Jodie May, Steve Waddington, Wes Studi, and Maurice Reviz. As the last members of a dying Native American tribe, the Mohicans, Uncas, played by Eric Schweig, his father, Chenku, played by Russell Means, and his adopted half-white brother Hawkeye, played by Daniel Day-Lewis, live in peace alongside the British colonies. But when the daughter of a British colonel, Cora and Alice Monroe, played by Madeline Stowe and Jodie May, are kidnapped by a treacherous scout, Hawkeye and Euconis must rescue them from the crossfire of a gruesome military conflict of which they wanted no part of. It happens to be the French and Indian War. So Michael Mann does a fantastic job of making the reality of the 1700s, the mid-1700s, come to life in this depiction of the era in America at the time. The costumes are fabulous. We got some fantastic Native American actors portraying like realistic, wholesome, not like cardboard cutouts or caricatures of these wholesome people just trying to work with and exist around this new world that comes crashing in around them. The movie has some spectacular fight sequences, very graphic, nice. Like, for a movie like this, you wouldn't expect to see great special effects makeup with some really good gore, I would say, to like just like put it out there. It's but again, it's not the centerpiece. We've got a great rich story that's again brought to life by this spectacular group of actors, dealing with the British side and the American Indians, and what the conflict between the two sides, the different tribes now getting involved. It's just a wonderful ride to witness, and there's no wonder why it had such a spectacular receivance when it was originally released, because this is like top tier like acting and directing. Camera work is fantastic in this. Like, we have a what seems like a at the time would have been a big bulky sort of film camera moving into like this wildly choreographed fight sequences as people like whipping around and all that sort of thing. And sometimes the camera gets right in there and you have this like almost like early days shaky cam that becomes much more popular later on in the late 90s and into the 2000s. But dealing with such a very well done movie is just a feast to be witnessing. So at one point when Cora and Alice Munro are being escorted, they are attacked by the Hurons, but it is actually Hawkeye and his brother Uncas that comes to their rescue, and then they end up being their escorts to the nearby fort, arriving the day that the French siege begins, which was August 3rd of 1737, which happens 30 minutes into this 1 hour and 57-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular season, it actually got a win for Best Sound. And as it is the 4th of August, we are going to be watching The Diary of Anne Frank from 1959. Directed by George Stevens and starring Millie Perkins. I am aware of the story that this is based on. I apologize. The actual documentation of the words written by the actual woman herself, Anne Frank. There are several versions that have been done to this particular storyline, but it's basically something that I have never really pursued to actually investigating to actually witness. And as it would be, because of this project, this will be the first time watching this movie. And like I'd already said, not only does this movie star Millie Perkins, but it also stars Joseph Schildkraut, Shelley Winters, Richard Beymer, Gusty Huber, Lou Jacoby, Diane Baker, and Ed Wynn. In Nazi-occupied Holland in World War II, shopkeeper Kraler, played by Douglas Spencer, hides two Jewish families in his attic. Young Anne Frank, played by Millie Perkins, keeps a diary of everyday life for the Franks and the Van Dans, chronicling the Nazi threat as well as family dynamics. A romance with Peter Van Daan, played by Richard Beymer, causes jealousy between Anne and her sister Margot, played by Diane Baker. Otto Frank, played by Joseph Schildkraut, returns to the attic many years after the eventual capture of both families and finds his late daughter's diary. So, for obviously for reasons because of the story, a good portion of this movie takes place in the one setting, the attic area of the household that these two families are held up in. It's also very almost sort of documentarian esque, as we have constant, well, not constant, but occasional voiceovers by Anne Frank moving the story along. And again, for the length of time that they are actually basically trapped upper hiding area of the household. Now, I'm not going to claim that I know very much about the actual details of the actual story of Anne Frank, but if this is close to what actually is written in the pages, it's a very moving story of hope and of tragedy and just the struggle of humanity in the time when uh, the definitely the most unfortunate people were in charge of everything, having to cower because of a religious inclination is just most like devastating blight on the history of humanity. Now, we do have a lengthy movie, and we do get to explore a lot because we basically have an almost like single cast. We basically there are minor little extra players put into it, but we get to explore almost every single one's dynamics, which is a rare thing to see, which is quite entertaining. I will admit that the moment that Edwin showed up on screen, I'm like, that face looks familiar, but. And then realizing, oh, right, because he's not putting on a silly voice or something like that. This is the fantastic actor, Edwin, known as the voice of the Disney animated Alice in Wonderland's Mad Hatter. So, yeah, so it's really fun to see this actor doing something because I've seen footage of him basically like reciting the lines as he's acting through the motions for the animators to follow his lead, but this is not a very animated character, but it is a very strong character like everyone else in this movie. Once the group itself has to deal with like air raids and starvation rations, it is the arrest of the grocer who had unknowingly been supplying them with food, to them being discovered and arrested on August 4th, 1944, which is about 2 hours and 37 minutes into this 3-hour film. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular season, it ended up winning for Best Supporting Actress for Shelley Winters, Best Cinematography, and Best Art Direction. It also ended up getting nominated for Best Picture, Best Supporting Actor for Ed Wynn, Best Costume Design, Best Director, Best Original Score. And as it is August 5th, we are going to be watching Braveheart from 1995, directed and starring Mel Gibson. So this is a movie that I did see upon its early release, first release. I believe it was even opening weekend when me and a bunch of my friends at the time went to go see it. And it was quite the interesting watch to see on the big screen. Not really knowing much about the kind of story that we were going to be watching, except for what we saw from commercials and trailers at the time. However, while I have seen it quite a few times, it actually has been quite a while since I have actually seen this movie. And that being said, like I already mentioned, not only does this movie star Mel Gibson, but it also stars Patrick McGoohan, Angus McFadden, Brendan Gleeson, Sophie McCure, Peter Hanley, and Ian Bannon. William Wallace, played by Mel Gibson, is a medieval Scottish patriot who is spurred into revolt against the English when the love of his life is slaughtered, leading his army into battle that becomes a war. His advance into England threatened King Edward I, played by Patrick McGoohan, his throne before he is captured and executed, but not before becoming a symbol for a free Scotland. So this movie, at the original time that it was released, was just a fascinating thing to be witnessing. It was really cool to be in a theater for more than like the standard film that, at least from my point of view at the time. This being a 3 hour-ish movie was just something that I hadn't experienced before prior to that. However, it was quite entertaining. Fantastic cast. The costuming looks great. The cinematography is fantastic in this movie. Mel Gibson does a great job of both directing and starring in this film as the lead on both fronts of that situation. We get a spectacular performance from all parties involved in this movie, and one of the greatest things about this movie is our battle sequences. I had forgotten just how graphic and gory some of the effects that they use to show like kills and whatnot throughout the movie, but it's just so spectacularly done, especially for 1995 as well, reflecting on this movie like almost like 30 years later. But it is so well done. Now, one of the most troubling things is, of course, when we originally saw this movie, was a lot of harm comes to the horses within the realms of the movie itself. Now, one of the great things about the movie when it came out at the time is there was all those entertainment programs that would always show you behind the scenes stuff, and they showed a lot of how a lot of these stunts were done for Braveheart, and how they showed the stand-in fake horses and how realistic they actually looked, and you actually forget about it when you're actually watching the movie. There are a lot of stunt horses that do falls over and rolls and whatnot and get up and whatnot, but they show a lot of the actual like fakeness of the horses that get, skewered by wooden spears or leap off of a giant hill height into a water source and whatnot, which definitely did not really happen. But again, just a spectacular movie to watch and witness. And again, watching it again after so long is just like, yeah, this is what movies were back in the day, and it still stands up to some of the stuff we get recently. Not to mention the fact that the lack of computer-assisted effects as well also helps. This movie being practical for every single thing you see. Of course, this movie is more fantastical storytelling than history accuracy, but it doesn't really matter at this point. Well, it has the idea of the storyline, that the actual reality of the storyline. It's still more of an entertainment. It's more of a popcorn movie, which is basically what it was made for, to bring the idea of the story to the general public. So after several confrontations between Wallace's people and the English and all that sort of thing, the English actually finally capture him on August 5th, 1305, and he ends up having to pay the price for his wrongdoings against the king. And that actually happens at about 2 hours and 27 minutes. Into this 2 hour and 57-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular season, it actually ended up winning for Best Cinematography, Best Director, Best Makeup, Best Picture, and Best Sound Editing, as well as getting nominations for Best Costume Design, Best Film Editing, Best Original Dramatic Score, Best Sound, and Best Original Screenplay. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this particular episode and look off into the future to see what we're going to watch for tomorrow for the 6th of August, and that is going to be Above and Beyond from 1952. So until next time, go see a movie.
This has been A Year of Movies, a Planet Geek production. Please be sure to subscribe, download, comment, share, rate, and review. Once again, another thanks to Ivan Walters for his book, A Year of Movies, 365 films to watch on the day they happened. Look for it online or at your local bookstore. Follow Planet Geek Productions on all of our social media. Through Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr, and Letterboxd, search for Planet Geek Productions. On X, former Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky, search for Planet Geek Pod. You can also reach out to us through email at planetgeekpod@gmail.com. Once again, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, go see a movie.